Adrian Cole didn't marry Alara for love. He married her to prove a brutal point. To him, love was a weakness, something foolish people believed in. So he chose a quiet woman with nothing, no money, no status, no power, and turned their marriage into a cold experiment. But on the night he finally uncovered the truth she had been hiding, the most powerful man in the room couldn't say a single word. Because the woman he thought was powerless had a secret that could destroy everything he believed about love. Welcome back to Mr. Leo's Endless Stories, my wonderful family and friends. If you're already feeling pulled into this story, take a moment to subscribe and join our growing storytelling family. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. New emotional and powerful stories are waiting for you, and you definitely don't want to miss the next one. Now, let us begin. The city of Silverhaven glittered every night like a crown made of glass and ambition. Towering skyscrapers pierced the sky, their windows reflecting 1,000 lives moving at relentless speed. For most people in the city, survival meant running faster than everyone else. But for Adrian Cole, survival had never been the problem. Control was. At 34, Adrian Cole was the youngest billionaire in Silverhaven and the founder of Cole Dynamics, a technology empire worth billions. Newspapers described him with words like brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. Those who worked under him preferred a simpler description: cold. The boardroom was silent as Adrian finished speaking. 20 executives sat around the polished table, their reflections gliding across the dark surface like ghosts. Adrian stood at the far end, tall and composed in a charcoal suit that seemed tailored for authority itself. His voice had the calm sharpness of a blade. "We will acquire Vortex Systems by the end of the quarter," he said. One executive hesitated. "But sir, they rejected the first offer." Adrian's eyes didn't even flicker. "Then they'll accept the second. And if they don't," Adrian slid a document across the table, "then we make sure they don't have a choice." Silence settled again. No one argued. Adrian Cole did not negotiate emotions. He negotiated outcomes. The meeting ended 20 minutes later as executives filed out, whispering in quiet admiration and fear. Adrian remained alone at the massive window overlooking the city. The lights below looked small from this height, insignificant, much like people. His assistant, Victor, stepped into the office carefully. "Sir, the charity gala tonight begins at 8. Adrian didn't turn. "I remember." Victor hesitated. "It's hosted by the Chamber of Commerce. Many investors will be present." Adrian finally glanced over. "I assume that is why I agreed to attend." Victor nodded quickly and left. Adrian returned his gaze to the skyline. A reflection in the glass stared back at him. Sharp eyes, controlled expression, a face that had learned long ago never to reveal anything. Love was weakness. He had learned that lesson the hard way. 5 years ago. He rarely thought about it now, but sometimes, in quiet moments like this, the memory slipped through the cracks of his carefully constructed life. A woman's voice, a promise, and the realization that everything had been a lie. Adrian exhaled slowly. Never again. Across the city, far from the towers and glass palaces, another life moved at a quieter rhythm. Alara Vale walked carefully through the narrow aisles of a small neighborhood bookstore. The shop smelled faintly of old paper and cinnamon tea. It was her favorite place in the city, not because it paid well, it didn't, but because it was peaceful. Alara stacked a small tower of novels on the counter, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face. The owner, Mrs. Dalloway, glanced up from her reading glasses. "You have reorganized the poetry section again," she said. Alara smiled softly. "It was a little messy." Mrs. Dalloway chuckled. "You've been working here 6 months and you've already improved everything." Alara shrugged. "I just like order." The older woman studied her. "You should be doing something bigger with your life." Alara's smile faded slightly. "Maybe someday." She didn't explain further. She never did. Outside, the city moved loudly. Car horns, distant music, people rushing somewhere important. Inside the bookstore, time felt slower, safer. Alara liked quiet places. They made it easier to hide. A small bell above the door chimed as a customer entered. Alara looked up, but it wasn't a customer. 2 men in expensive suits stepped inside. their presence instantly out of place among dusty shelves and handwritten price tags. The taller one spoke. Are you Miss Alara Vale? Her stomach tightened. Yes. He handed her an envelope. This is for you. Before she could ask anything else, both men left. Alara stared at the envelope for several seconds. Her name was written in elegant ink. Inside was a single card and a message that Mr. Adrian Cole requests your presence tomorrow evening. Her heart skipped. Adrian Cole. Even someone who lived quietly knew that name. The billionaire. The untouchable man whose face appeared in every financial magazine. Alara's fingers trembled slightly as she read the final line. There is a proposal I believe will interest you. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the distant sky. Alara folded the card slowly. Something told her that tomorrow night would change everything. She just didn't know how. And somewhere across the glittering city, Adrian Cole was already planning the marriage that would prove his point. The next evening arrived with a quiet, restless tension that Alara could not explain. All day, the envelope had sat folded inside her coat pocket like a secret that refused to stay silent. Every few minutes, her fingers brushed against it as if confirming it was still real. Adrian Cole. The name alone carried weight. He was the kind of man who appeared in headlines about billion-dollar deals and technological revolutions. People spoke about him with a mixture of admiration and unease. Men like Adrian Cole did not send invitations to people like Alara Vale. And yet, here she was, standing in front of one of the most luxurious hotels in the entire city. The grand entrance of the Arlington Grand shimmered beneath crystal lights. Valets moved smoothly between sleek black cars while elegantly dressed guests stepped onto the marble steps like characters from another world. Alara paused across the street, clutching the strap of her small handbag. Her reflection stared back from the polished glass doors at a simple navy dress. Low heels, hair neatly tied back. She looked ordinary. Very ordinary. For a moment, she considered turning around. This was ridiculous, but something deeper held her there. Something heavier than curiosity, responsibility. With a quiet breath, she crossed the street. The lobby was enormous. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling like frozen waterfalls of light. A grand piano played softly near the center of the room while guests moved around in expensive fabrics and confident laughter. Alara felt like a shadow walking through sunlight. She approached the reception desk. Good evening, she said softly. I'm here to see Mr. Adrian Cole. The receptionist's eyes flicked quickly to her computer. Yes, Miss Vale. Mr. Cole is expecting you. That answer alone sent a ripple of surprise through her chest. Expecting her, a young assistant approached and gestured politely. Please follow me. They walked toward a private elevator. As the doors closed, Alara caught a glimpse of the glittering lobby disappearing below. Her heart beat faster with every passing floor. 30 seconds later, the elevator opened into a quiet private lounge. Soft golden lighting filled the room. Large windows revealed the entire skyline stretching endlessly into the night. And standing near the window was a man who seemed carved from stillness itself. Adrian Cole. Even from across the room, his presence was unmistakable. Tall, sharp posture, dark tailored suit, but it was his expression that struck her most. Composed, controlled, emotionally distant. He turned as she stepped forward. For a brief second, Adrian simply studied her, not rudely, not warmly, just analytically, as if observing something unexpected. You're Alara Vale, he said calmly. His voice was deep and steady. Yes. Thank you for coming. He gestured toward a chair. Please sit. Alara obeyed quietly. The server placed 2 glasses of water on the table before leaving. Silence settled between them. Adrian sat across from her, folding his hands loosely on the table. Up close, his eyes were striking, sharp gray, almost metallic. Eyes that looked like they had learned to trust nothing. You're probably wondering why I asked you here, he said. Yes. I'll explain. His tone was straightforward, almost businesslike. I'm getting married. Alara blinked in surprise. That was not the sentence she expected. Congratulations, she said politely. Adrian shook his head slightly. You misunderstand. Another pause. Then he said something that made the entire world feel strangely still. I want to marry you. For a moment, Alara thought she had misheard him. The city lights glittered behind him like distant stars. I'm sorry, what? Adrian's expression remained calm. I would like you to become my wife. The sentence landed between them like a stone dropped into water. Ripples of disbelief spread through Alara's mind. She stared at him. You don't even know me. That's correct. And yet you want to marry me. Yes. Silence stretched across the table. Finally, Alara spoke again. Why? Adrian leaned back slightly in his chair. For the first time, a faint shadow crossed his expression. Because I need to prove something. To whom? To myself. The honesty of the answer caught her off guard. Adrian continued calmly. 5 years ago, I believed in something called love. I believed it made people honest. Loyal. His jaw tightened slightly. I was wrong. The words carried a quiet bitterness. So now, he continued, I want to demonstrate that marriage is nothing more than a transaction. Alara's brows furrowed. I don't understand. I'm offering you a contract marriage. He slid a document across the table. The arrangement will last 1 year. Her eyes moved slowly across the paper. Financial compensation, luxury housing, full legal protection. An amount of money so large her breath caught. Her fingers froze on the page. You're serious? Completely. And after 1 year, we divorce. Just like that. Simple, clean, transactional. Alara looked up at him. Why me? Adrian answered without hesitation. Because you have no public ties to my business world. No political affiliations. No social ambitions. You live quietly. That makes you ideal. The words sounded clinical. As if she were being selected for a position rather than a marriage. And what exactly are you proving? She asked slowly. Adrian met her gaze directly. That love is an illusion. Silence fell again. Outside the window, a helicopter crossed the dark sky like a distant insect. Alara studied him carefully now. For the first time, she saw something beneath his perfect composure. Not arrogance. Something else. Wounded pride. You've been hurt, she said quietly. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Adrian's eyes hardened slightly. That's irrelevant. No, she said gently. It's not. For a moment, it seemed as though he might end the conversation entirely. But instead, he said calmly, will you accept the offer? Her mind spun with 1,000 thoughts. This was absurd, impossible. Yet the numbers written on the page could change everything. Hospital bills, debt, the quiet weight she carried every day. Adrian watched her silently. It was used to people saying yes to money. But something about her hesitation intrigued him. Finally, she asked a question that surprised him. If I say yes, will you treat me with respect? Adrian didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, I will treat you fairly. That was not the same thing. But Alara understood something else in that moment. This man did not understand kindness. Not anymore. She folded the contract slowly, and then she looked directly into his eyes. All right. Adrian's expression shifted, only slightly. You accept? Yes. May I ask why? Alara's answer came softly. Because sometimes people do things for reasons they can't explain. That answer lingered in the air. Adrian studied her again. For the first time since she entered the room, he felt something unfamiliar. Curiosity. But what he did not know, what he could not possibly imagine, was that the quiet woman sitting across from him carried a truth that would soon shatter every certainty he believed about love, pride, and the human heart. And when that truth finally surfaced, Adrian Cole would be left completely speechless. If you were Alara, would you accept Adrian's marriage offer for 1 year, or walk away from it completely? Comment accept or walk away below. Also give your reason, someone might learn from it. 3 days after the meeting at the Arlington Grand, the marriage of Adrian Cole and Alara Vale became official. There was no wedding ceremony, no flowers, no music, no smiling guests holding glasses of champagne. Instead, the union happened in a quiet government office with neutral walls and fluorescent lights that hummed softly above them. A legal clerk stamped the documents. Congratulations, she said politely. Adrian signed his name with swift confidence. Alara signed more slowly. The sound of the pen scratching across paper felt strangely loud. And just like that, it was done. Adrian Cole, Billionaire CEO, had married a woman the world had never heard of. He stood and adjusted his suit jacket. Victor will take care of the logistics, he said calmly. Alara nodded. All right. The entire interaction felt less like a marriage and more like the closing of a business deal, which, Adrian supposed, was exactly the point. Outside the building, a sleek black car waited. Victor Hayes stood beside it holding a tablet, already organizing the next steps. "The residence has been prepared," Victor said. "Your belongings have been transferred, Miss Vale." Alara hesitated. Transferred. That word sounded strange. As if her life had been packed into boxes without asking permission. She climbed into the car. Adrian sat across from her, his attention already focused on his phone. The drive across the city was quiet. Neither of them spoke. The car eventually turned into a gated driveway lined with tall, iron fences and manicured hedges. Alara leaned slightly toward the window. Beyond the gate stood a massive estate. White stone walls, towering pillars, and large windows glowing softly in the evening light. It looked less like a home and more like a private palace. The gates opened. The car rolled forward. Alara felt an unfamiliar heaviness settle in her chest. This place was beautiful, but it felt cold. Inside, the house was even larger. High ceilings, marble floors, long hallways decorated with modern art that probably cost more than most houses. A staff of housekeepers greeted them politely before disappearing just as quickly. Adrian walked ahead, as if giving a tour. "This will be your room." He opened a large door. The bedroom was enormous, soft lighting, a wide bed, tall windows overlooking the gardens. Alara stepped inside slowly. "This is too much." "It's appropriate," Adrian replied simply. She turned toward him. "And where will you sleep?" "My room is on the opposite wing." That answer surprised her. "You don't expect us to share a room?" Note that Adrian's tone was calm. "This marriage is contractual. There's no reason to complicate it." Alara nodded slowly. Something about his words sounded oddly respectful, or perhaps distant, maybe both. Adrian continued. "There are a few expectations." She folded her hands. "I assumed there would be. You'll attend public events with me when necessary." "All right. You'll appear with me in media photographs when required." "Okay. And you'll maintain discretion regarding the nature of our arrangement." "That seems fair." Adrian studied her briefly. "You're taking this surprisingly well." Alara gave a small shrug. "I've had more surprising things happen in my life." Her calmness unsettled him slightly. Most people would be overwhelmed by the situation. But Alara moved through the mansion quietly, observing everything without fascination or greed, as if luxury itself held little power over her. Later that evening, Adrian worked in his home office while Alara wandered through the garden. The night air carried the soft scent of jasmine. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. This place was beautiful, but beauty didn't erase loneliness. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Adrian, you'll need clothing appropriate for public appearances," he said. "I have clothes." "They won't be suitable." "I'm sure they're fine." "They're not." The bluntness made her turn toward him. "You haven't even seen them." "I don't need to." Alara crossed her arms slightly. "That's a bit arrogant." Adrian met her gaze evenly. "It's practical." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Alara said quietly, "You didn't marry a mannequin, Adrian." The use of his name surprised him. He wasn't used to hearing it spoken so casually. "I'm aware," he replied. "Then maybe stop treating me like one." Her voice wasn't angry, just firm. Adrian felt something unusual stir inside his chest. Resistance. Most people complied with him immediately. But Alara pushed back, not aggressively, but calmly. Daiti made him study her more carefully. "You're different from what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "Someone more impressed." Alara laughed softly. Not mockingly, just honestly. "I've seen impressive things before." Adrian frowned slightly. "You worked in a bookstore." "Yes." "That's not exactly a life filled with luxury." "Luxury isn't the only impressive thing in the world." The answer lingered between them. Adrian didn't know how to respond. Later that night, the house grew quiet. Adrian sat alone in his office, reviewing business reports, but his concentration kept drifting. His thoughts returned to the garden conversation. Alara Vale. She didn't behave like someone who had just gained access to unimaginable wealth. She didn't ask questions about money. She didn't explore the mansion like a tourist. She simply existed within it, calm, reserved, unimpressed. It made Adrian uneasy, because his entire theory depended on one thing: that people were predictable, that everyone had a price. Yet Alara behaved as though she hadn't noticed the price at all. Across the mansion, Alara sat by the bedroom window looking out at the dark garden. Her phone lay in her hands. The screen displayed a message, a hospital notification, another payment reminder. Her expression tightened slightly. Then she placed the phone down. This marriage wasn't about money. Not really. It was about something much heavier. Something Adrian Cole didn't know. Something she wasn't ready to reveal. Not yet. Because if he discovered the truth too soon, everything could collapse. And despite the coldness of their arrangement, Alara had already realized something surprising about Adrian Cole. Behind his arrogance and control, there was a loneliness so deep it almost felt visible. But loneliness can make people do cruel things. And Adrian was determined to prove a point, even if it meant breaking the quiet woman who had just become his wife. The first week of the marriage passed without incident, but calm was a fragile illusion. Adrian had expected distance, obedience, and indifference. Alara had given none of those in full. Instead, she was quietly present, navigating the mansion with grace, but never allowing herself to be controlled. Their paths finally collided in the grand kitchen, an accidental setting for what Adrian would later remember as the first real confrontation. It was early morning. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, reflecting gold on polished countertops. The scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air, though it was Alara who had prepared it. Adrian entered the kitchen, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up slightly. A rare casual appearance. He froze. Alara was arranging plates on the table. Her hair caught the sunlight, soft waves falling across her shoulders. "Good morning," she said without looking up. Adrian remained silent, watching her for a moment longer than polite. "You're awake early," she continued. "I prefer to start my day before the world does," he replied, finally moving closer. Alara glanced up, meeting his gaze. For a moment, the mansion felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were aware of their proximity. "You don't usually speak to me this much," she said softly, almost teasing. "I don't usually speak to anyone this much." Adrian returned evenly. There was an edge to his tone, a controlled tension. He was unaccustomed to conversation that didn't revolve around instructions or deals. Alara set down a plate and turned to face him fully. Her eyes were calm but alert, reading him carefully. "Then let's make it simple," she said. "I will stay out of your way. You stay out of mine. We coexist. That is enough, isn't it?" Adrian's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, but the words hesitated. For the first time in years, someone refused to bow to the invisible power he wielded over people. "You misunderstand," he said finally. "This isn't about coexistence. This is about understanding the arrangement." "I understand it perfectly," she replied. "You want to prove a point." I agreed. "That is all." He frowned. There was something in her tone that made it impossible to dismiss her as ordinary. "You don't seem frightened," he said. "Why would I be?" Alara asked, tilting her head slightly. "You aren't the first person to try to control me." Adrian felt a sting in the chest he had long numbed. Most people cowered or flattered. She did neither. And yet, he found himself intrigued. That evening, a storm rolled over Silverhaven. The wind howled through the estate's gardens, rattling the windows. Adrian had expected to be alone in the library, reviewing quarterly reports, but the storm had other plans. A fallen tree blocked the entrance road. Delivery and maintenance staff were trapped outside. No one could reach the mansion safely until morning. Adrian paced the library, restless, realizing he couldn't leave. He glanced toward the sitting room. Alara was already there, curled in a large armchair with a blanket around her shoulders, reading quietly by the fireplace. The firelight flickered across her face, highlighting the soft lines of concentration. Adrian hesitated at the doorway. "Do you mind if I join you?" he asked, her eyes lifted briefly. "Suit yourself." It wasn't warmth. It was an invitation. But it was enough. He moved to the other chair, seating himself with a careful distance between them. Silence filled the room, not uncomfortable, but charged. Hours passed. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, echoing like a drumbeat. Inside, there were no words, only the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional sound of Adrian's pen-scratching notes in his pad. Finally, Alara spoke, voice low. "You don't need to pretend you're fine being alone." Adrian froze. The words pierced his practiced armor. What?" he asked cautiously. "You're not used to having someone else in your life," she said. "Even like this. Even when you think you're detached. It shows." Her honesty unsettled him. Normally, he would respond with a sharp remark or deflection. But the storm outside and her calm presence made it different. He sat silently, staring into the fire. He hadn't realized how empty the silence had been for so long. Alara's gaze softened slightly, though she didn't smile. We're stuck here tonight. Might as well coexist peacefully. Adrian's lips tightened. Coexistence. That word, said with her quiet defiance, carried a subtle weight. He nodded once. Agreed. The storm raged on. Hours later, the electricity flickered and went out, plunging the room into near darkness. The fire's glow became the only light. Adrian reached for a candle and lit it, setting it carefully on the table between them. The small circle of warm light cast shadows across their faces. For the first time, the physical distance in the room seemed less important than the emotional one. Neither spoke for several minutes, just existing in the same space. And in that forced proximity, something imperceptible began to shift. A mutual recognition that, even if neither admitted it yet, their lives were entwined by more than paper and a signature. Adrian caught himself glancing at her more than he intended, noticing the way she tilted her head while reading, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the calm certainty in her expression. Alara, for her part, felt an unfamiliar awareness of his presence. It was not attraction, not yet, but it was attention, an attention that could no longer be ignored. By the time the storm passed and the first light of dawn seeped through the tall windows, Adrian and Alara had spent the night in the same room, sharing silence instead of conversation, proximity instead of distance. Neither had planned it. Neither had expected it, but something had begun. The first crack in their defensive walls. The days that followed were marked by quiet routines, shared meals, and polite distance. But beneath the calm, tension simmered like a slow-burning fire. Adrian Cole, for all his power, found himself studying Alara Vale more than he would admit. She carried herself with dignity, a quiet strength that contradicted the assumptions he had built in his mind. One evening, he found her alone in the mansion's study, surrounded by stacks of books. A single lamp cast a warm circle of light over the table. She was bent over a notebook, pen scratching quickly, as if trying to capture thoughts that refused to stay still. Adrian cleared his throat softly. You're working late, he said. Alara looked up, startled. She folded her notebook and placed it gently on the table. I like to read and write, she explained. It keeps me organized. Focused. Focused on what? He asked, leaning against the doorway. Her eyes flicked to his briefly before returning to the notebook. On things I need to do and things I don't want to forget. Adrian raised an eyebrow. Things you don't want to forget. Alara hesitated. Then, softly, my past, my family, decisions I had to make. Adrian's curiosity piqued. Most people didn't share this willingly. He stepped further into the room. I didn't expect you to talk about anything personal, he said. Alara gave a small, almost rueful smile. I didn't expect to be married to someone like you either. He paused. There was a subtle accusation in her words, though it was buried under layers of calm. Someone like me? He asked, genuinely intrigued. You, she said simply. Controlled. Precise. Unmoved by anything that doesn't serve your purpose. Adrian's lips pressed into a thin line. He had worked decades to maintain that image. And here she was, unafraid, unimpressed. Then I suppose you're not surprised that I married you to prove a point, he said, almost bitterly. Alara's expression softened. She leaned back in the chair and met his gaze directly. No, I'm not surprised. I expected arrogance. I expected wealth. I didn't expect honesty, even if it's harsh. Her words lingered in the room, heavier than either of them admitted. Then, for the first time, she shared a sliver of her past. I grew up learning that the world isn't kind, she began quietly. My parents, they did their best, but there were times when I had to care for my siblings alone. Times when I went hungry so they could eat. Times I had to be invisible just to survive. Adrian watched her. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. I learned early that kindness doesn't always come back. That love can hurt more than it heals. That sometimes you have to protect your dignity by holding your secrets close. Her words painted a picture of resilience. And for the first time, Adrian felt something unfamiliar, respect and guilt. He had married her to demonstrate that love was meaningless. Yet here she was, proof of everything he refused to believe. Strength, sacrifice, and the quiet courage that came from a life of hardship. Adrian cleared his throat. I didn't know. You didn't need to, Alara said softly. It's not your life to carry. There was a pause. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of things unspoken. Finally, Adrian asked the question he had avoided since their first meeting. Why did you accept the marriage? Knowing it was a contract? Knowing He trailed off, struggling to phrase the words. Alara's eyes glimmered faintly with emotion. Because I had to make choices, she said. Not for money, not for status, but because sometimes opportunity arrives in unexpected forms, and you have to decide if you're brave enough to take it, even when it feels wrong. Adrian felt a pang of something he didn't recognize. Unease, intrigue, perhaps even admiration. Her honesty unsettled him. He had never encountered someone who accepted a challenge without fear, without complaint, and yet carried herself with unwavering composure. Then, in a quiet moment, Alara admitted something deeper. There's more to me than you see, she said. Things I can't reveal yet. But know this, whatever you think you are proving with me, you're missing the point entirely. Adrian's chest tightened. Something about her words cut through the arrogance he had clung to for years. What point? He asked quietly, leaning forward slightly. Alara shook her head. That people aren't objects. We aren't proof of a theory. We have hearts, choices, lives. And even when you think you're in control, the truth has a way of coming out. Adrian felt a shiver run down his spine. He realized then that Alara's hidden strength was not just emotional. It was moral, ethical, unyielding, and unlike anyone he had ever encountered. The mansion seemed smaller suddenly. The walls, the furniture, even the firelight felt insignificant compared to the weight of the truths she carried. For the first time, Adrian questioned the foundation of his arrangement. Had he truly understood what he was doing, or had he underestimated the woman sitting quietly before him? Alara, sensing his unease, returned to her notebook. She wrote with deliberate care, but occasionally glanced up, her eyes meeting his. Unspoken understanding passed between them. Each was aware of the other's power, yet neither could fully claim dominance. Hours passed, filled with quiet tension. Adrian left the room eventually, but he did not retreat to the safety of his business. Instead, he wandered the halls, replaying her words in his mind. Alara had revealed enough to unsettle him. Not everything, just enough. And Adrian Cole, for all his control and arrogance, had never felt so unprepared in his life. The backstory of her hardship, her resilience, and the dignity she had maintained in the face of suffering now hovered between them like a fragile, invisible thread, ready to connect or snap. The stage was set. The first cracks had appeared in Adrian's armor, and the next revelation would bring the two of them even closer, or threaten to tear everything apart. Do you think Adrian will eventually respect Alara, or will his pride destroy their marriage first? Comment respect or pride below. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion that once felt like a fortress now began to echo with small, unexpected moments of connection. Adrian Cole, who had entered the marriage believing it would be a simple demonstration of control, found himself noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The way Alara tilted her head when reading, the quiet precision with which she organized the kitchen, the small laugh that escaped her lips when she caught a book falling off the shelf. He hated to admit it, but he was drawn to these moments. One rainy evening, the city lights blurred behind the tall windows. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tension he felt when he walked into the library and found Alara already there, curled up on the arm of a large leather chair, reading a worn novel. You're always here, he said quietly, closing the distance between them. Alara looked up from her book. You work too much, she said. It's nice to see someone in this house who actually lives in it. Adrian frowned. You sound like you're criticizing me. I'm not, she said, eyes soft but firm. I'm observing. He paused. Her words were more accurate than he wanted to admit. He dropped into the chair opposite her, still cautious, still distant, but less so than before. For a long moment, they simply existed in the same space. The soft ticking of the antique clock filled the silence. Outside, the rain drummed gently on the windows. Inside, the fire cast a warm glow, turning shadows into familiar shapes. Finally, Adrian spoke, voice low. Do you ever regret accepting this? Alara considered the question, letting the pen in her hand hover above the open notebook. "No," she said finally. "It's challenging, but challenges teach you more than comfort ever could." Adrian studied her closely. The light of the fire made her features glow, highlighting the calm strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. He realized that her resilience was not just in surviving hardship. It was in how gracefully she met life's uncertainties. "I don't understand you," he said honestly, for the first time revealing something he rarely did. "I don't expect you to," she replied, a small, fleeting smile brushing her lips. "Most people don't." There was a pause, a moment of unspoken understanding. Then, almost imperceptibly, she shifted slightly closer to him, moving her notebook to the side. "I know you're used to control," she said softly. "But not everything can be controlled. Not feelings, not people, not even luck." Adrian felt a strange pull in his chest, a mixture of admiration and something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Vulnerability. "You've changed since the first night," she continued. "You notice things now. You listen. You don't just command." He said nothing because he couldn't. Her words carried a truth he wasn't ready to face. They spent the rest of the evening in companionable silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire and the soft scratch of her pen as she wrote. In the following days, small rituals began to form between them. Mornings in the garden, sipping tea in quiet company. Evenings by the fireplace, reading or discussing the day. Shared laughter over trivial mishaps, a spilled cup of tea, a book falling from a shelf. An overcooked dinner. One night, as they prepared a simple meal together, Adrian found himself laughing freely, a sound he realized he hadn't made in years. Alara looked at him, surprise and warmth in her eyes. "I didn't think billionaires laugh like that." He smirked, a flash of genuine humor. "You underestimate us." Their connection deepened not through declarations of love, but through these small, human moments. Through gestures that were honest, unforced, and grounded in reality. And yet, the bond remained fragile. Adrian's past lingered like a shadow, his belief that love was a weakness, his fear of being hurt again. Alara's secret waited quietly behind her calm eyes, a truth that could shatter everything if revealed too soon. Still, in the midst of cautious smiles and shared glances, they began to feel a subtle shift, a recognition that perhaps, despite the contract, despite the pride and fear, something real was emerging between them, something that neither money nor control could dictate. That night, as rain tapped gently against the windows and the mansion held them in its quiet embrace, Adrian realized a truth he could no longer deny. Alara Vale was no longer just part of his arrangement. She was slowly becoming part of his life, and whether he admitted it or not, that terrified him more than any business failure ever could. Weeks of subtle connection had begun to weave a fragile bond between Adrian and Alara. Yet even the strongest bonds can shatter in an instant. And sometimes the fracture begins not with intention, but with circumstance. It was a crisp autumn evening. The mansion's grand hall was lit softly, a charity gala being held in Adrian's honor. The room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of conversation. Alara had accompanied him at his request, a necessity, he reminded her, to maintain appearances. She moved quietly among the guests, noting their forced smiles and polished routines. Adrian, meanwhile, entertained dignitaries and investors with ease, his charm a practiced performance. Then she saw it. Clara Bennett, Adrian's former fiancée, the woman who had left him 5 years ago, breaking a trust he had never rebuilt. She glided through the room in a silk gown, radiant and assured. The moment their eyes met, a flash of recognition and tension passed through Adrian. Alara noticed immediately. Her heart tightened. She had learned to read subtle gestures, small tells that betrayed more than words ever could. Adrian's jaw clenched. His usual composure wavered. And then it happened. Clara approached Adrian with a smile that was far too intimate. "Adrian," she said softly. "It's been a long time." Adrian forced a polite smile. "Clara." "Yes, it has." Alara's pulse quickened. There was an unspoken electricity in the air, a history she didn't fully understand. Her mind raced. Questions she hadn't asked before now demanded answers. Clara leaned closer, her voice low and melodic. "I heard about your marriage. I didn't know you'd chosen her." She glanced at Alara with an almost imperceptible smirk. Alara felt the words as a physical weight. Her, she repeated, eyes narrowing slightly. Adrian stiffened. This is Alara Vale, he said formally, his tone betraying no emotion. My wife. Clara raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. I see. Well, congratulations, I suppose. Alara's hands clenched lightly at her sides. The invisible thread of trust she had built over weeks felt suddenly stretched and fragile. Later, in the privacy of the library, the tension finally erupted. You didn't tell me about her, Alara said quietly, though the words carried the sharp edge of betrayal. Adrian's expression darkened. I didn't think it was necessary. She's part of my past. It has no bearing on us. Part of your past? She echoed. She's still here. Tonight she lingered in your space, Adrian. She smiled at you, as if nothing ever happened between you. Adrian's jaw tightened. And did you confront her? Or did you assume everything? Alara's voice trembled slightly, not with anger, but with hurt. I didn't assume. I observed. And what I saw felt like a warning. Like I wasn't enough. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. You think this is about her? It isn't. It's about trust, and your need to interpret everything as a threat. Do you not see the danger of assuming too much? I see enough. Alara's voice rose, sharp now, breaking the fragile calm. I see that you married me as a contract, as a demonstration, and yet, I allowed myself to care, to notice you. And now you expect me to what? Accept it all quietly. Adrian's face tightened. For the first time, his composure cracked, revealing the rawness of his emotions. I married you to prove a point. I never promised anything else. I've spent years protecting myself. And now you question me because of shadows from my past. Alara's lips trembled. Shadows? Or perhaps truths you refuse to face. The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. Both of them were breathing heavily. The firelight cast their elongated shadows on the walls, two figures on the brink of collapse. Adrian finally turned away, pacing the room. You think you understand sacrifice. You think you understand loyalty. But you don't. You've had control in your life. You've had freedom. I've had to fight for every inch of trust one could give. And you, his voice broke slightly, but he caught it. You make assumptions that cut deeper than any betrayal. Alara sank into the chair, overwhelmed. Her chest ached. The warmth she had felt in their small, shared moments felt miles away. She realized, with a painful clarity, that the bond they had formed could shatter in an instant, and she feared it had. Hours later, the mansion was quiet again. Adrian retreated to his office. Alara returned to her room. Both lay awake, their thoughts tangled in misunderstanding, pride, and the weight of unspoken truths. The fragile connection they had built was at its lowest point. And yet, the story was far from over. Because beneath the surface of anger and pride, beneath the shadows of betrayal and fear, there remained a sliver of something neither wanted to admit: care. And sometimes, care alone is enough to ignite hope, if they are brave enough to let it. If someone you trusted suddenly behaved in a way that felt like betrayal, would you walk away immediately or wait to understand the truth? Comment walk away or wait below. The mansion was quiet in the early hours, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Adrian Cole sat alone in his office, the city skyline glittering dimly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The weight of the previous night pressed down on him like a physical force. He had spent years building walls around himself, walls of pride, precision, and control. Yet now he realized that those walls had failed to shield him from something far more dangerous than business failure: vulnerability. Across the hall, Alara Vale lay awake in her bedroom. The events of the gala replayed endlessly in her mind. Clara Bennett's presence, Adrian's subtle tension, the sharpness of their confrontation. It had left her questioning everything. But amidst the confusion, there was clarity. She had grown attached to this man, not as a contract partner, but as someone who had quietly begun to matter. The idea of losing the small connection they had formed was unbearable. Hours passed in silence. The mansion was still, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. Adrian stood and walked toward the balcony. The night air was cold, crisp against his skin. He inhaled deeply, trying to make sense of the storm inside him. He thought of Alara, her strength, her dignity, the quiet bravery she carried in every gesture. And then he remembered the first night of their forced proximity, when they had shared silence during the storm. He remembered how her presence had unsettled him in a way he had never expected. Could he risk exposing himself again? Could he risk acknowledging that he had begun to care? The answer was simple and terrifying. Yes. He moved back inside, pacing. Pride warred with longing. Fear battled with desire. Finally, he sat heavily at his desk and opened his phone. A message to her, simple, direct. Meet me in the library. I need to talk. Minutes later, Alara entered the library, cautious but steady. The fire was low, casting soft shadows across the room. Adrian stood by the fireplace, hands clasped loosely behind him. Adrian, she began, hesitant. Don't speak yet, he interrupted softly. His voice was low, almost vulnerable. I need to be honest. Not with words of business, not with control, but with truth. Alara nodded, remaining silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. I've spent my life protecting myself from being hurt. I've built walls so high, I believed no one could reach me. Her eyes softened, encouraging him to continue. But then you came, he said, voice breaking slightly. Not as a threat, not as a challenge. You came as yourself. Calm, unyielding. And he swallowed hard. I began to care. More than I thought possible. More than I allowed myself to believe I could. Alara's breath caught. She felt the same pull, the same mixture of fear and longing. You're not a contract to me anymore, he admitted, stepping closer. You're important. And I can't let pride dictate my actions anymore. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out, brushing lightly against his arm. Adrian, I care too, but I can't ignore what this contract represents, or the walls you've built. He took her hands in his, firm but gentle. Then let's stop pretending. Stop hiding behind arrangements, behind fear. I choose to be with you, not as a demonstration, not as a transaction, but as someone who wants you in his life. Alara's eyes glimmered with unshed tears. Even with everything that's happened, especially because of it, he said quietly. For the first time, neither pride nor fear controlled them. The mansion, the contract, the past, all of it faded in that moment. Two hearts, fragile and scarred, reached toward each other. They moved closer, a careful, tentative step, until their foreheads met, sharing the warmth of breath and the quiet acknowledgement of vulnerability. And in that simple gesture, years of walls, doubts, and fears began to crumble. It was a choice to trust, a choice to love, a choice that neither Adrian nor Alara would ever forget. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's tall windows, painting the marble floors with streaks of gold. For once, the house felt warm, not merely a building of wealth and control, but a home filled with quiet understanding. Adrian Cole moved through the rooms with an unusual lightness, a contrast to the rigid, calculated presence he had carried for years. Alara Vale followed him into the grand kitchen, carrying a basket of freshly baked bread. The aroma of cinnamon and warm dough filled the air, a sensory echo of the first meal they had shared weeks ago. I made too much, she said softly, smiling. You can help me finish it. Adrian chuckled, a deep, genuine sound that seemed almost foreign to the quiet walls. I think that's a risk I'm willing to take. They moved through the kitchen together, slicing bread, pouring coffee, their hands occasionally brushing. Each touch was electric yet comforting, a contrast of past fears and present warmth. Later, they walked into the garden, the autumn leaves crunching beneath their shoes. Adrian paused, glancing at Alara. You know, he said, voice low, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted when I married you. Alara tilted her head, curious. I wanted to prove a point, he admitted. That love could be controlled, that people could be measured, that I could dictate the outcome. She studied him carefully. And he continued, taking her hand. I realized I had been wrong. Not just about the marriage, but about everything. Life isn't about proof. It's about connection. And I've connected with you in a way I never imagined. Alara's eyes glistened, a mixture of relief, warmth, and affection. I've connected with you too, she said softly. Even when I tried to protect myself. Even when I was unsure of your intentions. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken promises and understanding. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded note. He handed it to her without a word. Alara opened it carefully. Written in Adrian's precise handwriting were simple words. I choose you. Every day. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she looked up. Adrian. He smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. No more contracts. No more games. Just us. And whatever the future brings. Alara stepped closer, resting her forehead against his. Then we face it together, she whispered. Adrian's arms enveloped her, and for the first time, the mansion did not feel like a cage. It felt like a sanctuary. They stayed there in silence, letting the world fade away. The storms of the past, the misunderstandings, the pride. Only the present existed. Two hearts, wounded but resilient, choosing to trust, to love, to be together. Later that day, Adrian and Alara walked hand in hand through the estate's gardens. The city hummed in the distance, but the world they had created together felt intimate, personal, real. And in that quiet intimacy, the lessons of the past, humility, vulnerability, patience, crystallized. Love, they realized, was not about proving a point. It was about risking everything to find someone who made the risk worthwhile. Adrian looked at her, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. You've changed me, Alara. And you've changed me, she replied. Not through wealth or power, but through honesty and heart. They laughed softly, a shared sound of relief and triumph. In that laughter was forgiveness, for the past, for mistakes, for the walls they had built around themselves. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden shadows across the estate, Adrian and Alara walked toward the horizon together. Their hands entwined, their hearts aligned, and their future no longer defined by contracts or pride, but by choice, courage, and love. The mansion had once been a stage for a calculated plan, but now it was home. And in its halls echoed the quiet truth that had carried them from resistance, through revelation, through betrayal, to the most profound reward of all, connection. They stopped by the fountain in the center of the garden, where water glittered in the late afternoon light. Adrian brushed a stray lock of hair from Alara's face and whispered, I promise. I will never take this for granted. Alara smiled, leaning into him. And I promise to always meet you here, in truth, in trust, and in love. They stood together as the fountain's water sparkled in the golden light, two souls reconciled, two hearts victorious, not because the world had conspired to make it easy, but because they had chosen each other. And in that choice lay their ultimate triumph, love that had endured storms, fear, pride, and secrets, and had emerged unshaken, radiant, and endless. If you had to take a risk on love despite fear and pride, would you do it? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. I truly hope you enjoyed every moment of it. There are many more powerful and emotional stories waiting for you here on Mr. Leo's Endless Stories. Just click on the video showing on your screen right now to continue with another beautiful story you won't want to miss.